He hadn't meant it to go this far. The idea had started as a casual joke, fun for a bomb, the kind people make when they feel completely in control of their world. Surrounded by friends and business partners, he had laughed, swirling his drink as someone mentioned the staff working behind the scenes. Why not invite her too, he had said, half amused, half curious. The table had responded with light laughter. No one took it seriously, neither did he, but the invitation was sent anyway. Not out of respect, not out of genuine interest, but out of curiosity, a small test, a moment of entertainment. In his mind, there was no real possibility she would show up. People understood their place. That was how his world worked. As the night of the event arrived, his focus shifted completely to the guests who mattered. Influential names, familiar faces, people who carried weight in conversations that shaped opportunities. The mansion had been prepared perfectly, every detail polished, every corner designed to impress. It wasn't just a party, it was a statement. He moved through the room with confidence, greeting each guest with practiced ease. His voice carried smoothly, his smile timed perfectly, his presence exactly where it needed to be. This was where he thrived, where he belonged. The staff worked quietly in the background, moving efficiently, almost invisible to the guests, just the way it was expected. He barely noticed them, except when something needed attention. Even then, it was brief, functional. At one point, as he stood near the grand staircase, someone brought up the earlier joke. "Did you actually invite her?" one of his friends asked, a hint of amusement still in his tone. He smirked slightly. "Of course," he replied. "Why not?" The group chuckled, shaking their heads. The group also chuckled. "There, and you think she'll come?" another added. He took a slow sip of his drink, his expression relaxed. "No," he said confidently. "People like her don't walk into places like this." The words were simple, calm, certain, and everyone around him agreed, because in their world things were predictable, structured. Everyone had a role, and no one stepped outside of it without consequences. That's what made the environment feel controlled, comfortable. But control has a way of slipping when least expected. As the evening continued, the energy in the room grew stronger. Conversations deepened, laughter spread, and the atmosphere settled into something effortless. He felt it again, a sense of belonging, of being exactly where he was supposed to be, until something changed. At first, it was subtle, a shift in attention near the entrance, a pause in movement, a few heads turning, followed by more. He didn't notice right away. But slowly, the room began to react to something unseen. And without realizing it, the moment he had laughed, the shift at the entrance didn't happen all at once. It started with a pause, then a glance, then a quiet stillness that spread across the room like a ripple. Conversations softened, faded just enough to be noticed. One by one, people turned their attention pulled towards something they couldn't immediately explain. He noticed it this time. At first, he assumed it was someone important, another guest with influence, someone worth acknowledging. He adjusted his stance slightly, preparing to greet whoever had just arrived. But the reactions didn't feel the same. There was no excitement, no immediate movement forward, just curiosity. Then he saw her. For a brief second, his expression didn't change. His mind hadn't caught up with what his eyes were seeing. As she stepped further into the room, the recognition hit. It was her. The same woman he had seen countless times, moving quietly through the halls, focused on her work, unnoticed by most. The same woman he had casually invited without a second thought. But nothing about her presence now matched that image. She walked with calm confidence, her posture straight, her steps steady and unhurried. Her outfit was elegant, refined, chosen with intention. It didn't try to compete with the room. It simply belonged in it, and that was what made it impossible to ignore. The room didn't know how to respond. Some guests exchanged quick glances, trying to understand what they were seeing. Others looked at him, as if expecting a reaction that would explain everything. He remained still, his confidence slipping just slightly beneath the surface. "She actually came," someone whispered nearby. It wasn't loud, but it carried. He forced a small smile, trying to regain control of the moment. "Well," he said lightly, "this should be interesting." But the tone didn't land the way he expected, because the room wasn't laughing anymore. She continued walking, not toward the edges, not toward the staff, but directly into the space where the guests stood. And as she moved, something unexpected happened. People made room, not out of obligation, not because they were told to, but because her presence demanded it without saying a word. There was no hesitation in her eyes, no uncertainty in her expression. She wasn't looking for approval. She wasn't waiting to be accepted. She had already accepted herself, and that changed everything. He watched closely now, his earlier confidence replaced with something quieter. Something unfamiliar. Control he thought he had over the situation was slipping. He couldn't quite understand why. Because in his mind, nothing had changed. But in reality, Everything had. The joke he made, the invitation he didn't take seriously, just walked into the room and taken its place. And for the first time that night, he wasn't sure what would happen next. About was no longer a joke. The room didn't return to normal after she entered. It adjusted. Conversations didn't stop. Room didn't return to normal. Sure. It adjusted. Conversations didn't stop, but they shifted. People spoke a little softer, watched a little closer. The same guests who had been confident just moments ago now seemed more aware of their surroundings, because something about her presence didn't fit the story they had already written in their minds. And that made them pay attention. She didn't rush to join any group. She didn't look for him either. Instead, she moved with quiet intention, acknowledging a few people with a polite nod, her expression calm and composed. There was no hesitation in her steps, no sign that she felt out of place. If anything, she seemed more grounded than most in the room. That was what unsettled him. He approached her slowly, forcing his usual confidence back into place. A small smile, controlled posture, the same energy he had used all evening. But this time, it felt different. "Actually came," he said, his tone light, as if the situation was still under his control. He turned to him, meeting his gaze without effort. "You invited me," she replied simply. "Follow!" "You invited me," she replied simply. There was no edge in her voice, no attempt to challenge him, just a statement, clear and steady. A few people nearby turned slightly, pretending not to listen while catching every word. The space around them grew quieter, attention pulling in without being obvious. He let out a short laugh. "I didn't think you would take it seriously." "I take myself seriously," she said. The words landed without force, but they carried weight. For a moment, he didn't respond. "We shawinvamping kishiks, rawung." This wasn't how he imagined the interaction. He expected hesitation, maybe discomfort, something that would confirm the difference between them, but she offered none of that. Instead, she stood there as if she had always belonged in spaces like this, and the room was starting to agree. One of the guests stepped closer, drawn by curiosity. "I don't believe we've met," they said, offering a polite introduction. Others followed, slowly, naturally, as if something about her presence invited respect rather than demanded it. She responded with calm confidence, her voice steady, her words thoughtful. She didn't over-explain. She didn't try to impress, and somehow, that made her stand out more. He watched as the same people who had laughed earlier now listened. Really listened. The shift was subtle, but undeniable. The attention he had spent the entire evening trying to hold was moving away from him, and it wasn't being taken, it was being given. He felt it clearly now, that quiet realization settling in. The joke wasn't funny anymore. The situation wasn't under his control, because the person he thought would be out of place was the only one who didn't seem to be trying. And in a room built on appearances, that kind of confidence was impossible to ignore. For the first time that night, he didn't know what to say next, and the room was waiting to see what he would do. The attention in the room had fully shifted now. What started as curiosity had turned into something else, respect. Not the kind that is announced or forced, but the kind that builds quietly when people recognize something real. She hadn't asked for it. She hadn't tried to earn it in the usual ways. But the way she carried herself, the way she spoke, the way she simply existed in that space, it changed how people responded to her, and he could see it. The same guests who had once laughed at the idea of her being there were now engaged in conversation with her, listening closely, asking questions, not out of politeness but genuine interest. Answered calmly, never rushing, never trying to prove anything, and that made every word feel more meaningful. 3-5-4 called. He stood a few steps away, watching. For the first time that night, he wasn't the center of attention. The room he had carefully built his image in was no longer revolving around him. And it wasn't because someone louder had taken his place. It was because someone quieter had changed the energy. He stepped closer again, trying to re-enter the moment. "Looks like you're enjoying yourself," he said, attempting a light tone, but it didn't carry the same confidence anymore. She turned toward him, her expression steady. "I'm comfortable," she replied, not impressed, not overwhelmed, just comfortable. That word stayed with him, because it was something he had been chasing all evening, adjusting himself to fit into every conversation, every expectation, and yet she had found it without trying. One of the guests nearby spoke up. "You have a very strong presence," they said to her. "It's rare." She gave a small, appreciative nod. Simple, direct, no performance. He looked around, noticing the change more clearly now. The way people stood near her, the way they responded, the way the atmosphere had settled into something calmer, more genuine. The same room that once felt controlled now felt honest, and that was unfamiliar to him. "I didn't expect this," he admitted quietly, his voice lower now. She looked at him, not with judgment, not with pride, but with clarity. "That's because you were expecting something else," she said. He didn't argue, because she was right. He had expected her to hesitate, to feel out of place, to confirm the image he had created in his mind. But instead, she had done the opposite. She had walked in and revealed the truth, not just about herself, but about the room, and about him. A silence passed between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was reflective, the kind that forces you to see things you hadn't noticed before. Around them, the evening continued. Conversations resumed, laughter returned, but it felt different now. Less forced, less calculated, more real. And as he stood there, watching her move through the space with quiet confidence, understood something he hadn't before. Respect isn't something you control, it's something you recognize. And tonight, everyone in that room had just learned that lesson.